Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it.
Billy got up much earlier than usual today. There was a good reason for that. Today at school, the principal was going to present a diploma for winning the regional Olympiad. Billy has loved math since childhood, although no one has ever taught him much. When he was 6 years old, he learned to count and write letters on his own. At that time, he played for days on end with a neighbor girl, Elizabeth, who was a couple of years older than him. Billy often admired Elizabeth's primer and notebooks. Elizabeth liked it very much. She was proud that she had already gone to school and knew a lot of things. And Billy and his little sister Leslie still had a long way to go. Later, Billy went to school. He was very proud that he could read fluently and add on his fingers while his peers were just learning the letters of the alphabet. So he didn't have to spend a lot of time at home on lessons. And he had a lot of free time. Even then, he decided not to waste this time. He opened his primer and taught his little sister Leslie, who at that time was barely 4 years old. This year, Billy was already in 9th grade, when the question arose about who would go to the Math Olympiad. Lucy's teacher did not have to think long about Billy. Knowing Billy's family circumstances well, Lucy decided to take the whole process into her own hands. She paid for his trip to the regional center and back. Lucy had no doubt that Billy would live up to her expectations. And so it was. Yesterday afternoon, a message came from the district department saying that Billy had won first place and had scored the maximum number of points. Lucy congratulated Billy in front of everyone and asked everyone to call their parents tomorrow, where there would be a ceremonial presentation of awards to all the participants of the Olympiad and a tea party. Billy told his mother about it in the evening. His mother listened indifferently and went on with her work. She's tired today, but tomorrow she'll be in a good mood when the principal presents me with a diploma and her with a letter of thanks, Billy thought to himself. He finally finished styling his hair with gel, and he had shined his shoes the night before. By now, Leslie had already had time to iron his white shirt. "Thank you, sis. If I get the money with the diploma today, I'll buy you a chocolate bar," Billy said and kissed her on the forehead. "Now get ready yourself, or you'll be late because of me. And make sure you make a sandwich and eat it before you go out," he added like a caring brother. After the end of the third lesson, the teacher asked everyone to line up. Tables were already set up in the courtyard of the school, and dozens of parents were sitting there in anticipation. Lucy excitedly ran around the classrooms and urged everyone to get in line as quickly as possible. "Billy, are your parents here yet?" she asked. "Mom promised to come. Is she here yet?" Billy asked. "I haven't seen her yet," Lucy said, shrugged her shoulders, and turned away, sighing heavily. Her fellow literature teacher, Betty, was whispering in her ear. "Lucy, why traumatize the boy like that? I don't think we'll see Billy's mother or father. It'll be business as usual." "That's what I mean, and the child is a pity," Lucy said and sighed once again. The gala was declared open. The principal made a solemn speech and began to hand out certificates and gifts. Billy kept looking at his mother from the crowd. He believed that she was late and was about to come running. But his mother never showed up. The principal presented Billy with his diploma first. She praised him, called him the pride of the whole school. As Billy expected, the school administration had prepared a gift for Billy's mother, but Billy himself had to receive the gift from the principal's hands. Leslie stood in the opposite row and jumped up and down as her brother received his well-deserved awards. As soon as the lessons were over, Billy hurried home. He didn't find his mother or father at home. He was hungry, but the refrigerator at home was empty. Billy changed his clothes and prepared something to eat for the whole family. Just as he sat down at the table, the front door to the apartment opened, and he heard a familiar sobbing sound. "Leslie, is that you?" Billy asked. Leslie didn't answer and continued sobbing. Billy seemed to realize what was wrong and walked over to his little sister. As soon as she saw her brother, she immediately cried. There they are, behind our playground on the sidewalk. Billy understood without further explanation what he was talking about. He and Leslie didn't have much time. He looked at his watch and figured he had about 20 or 30 minutes to eat lunch himself and feed Leslie. Then he'd have to get his little sister and get out of the apartment right away. Okay, stop crying. I got it. I made some food, and it's gonna take you a while to change. So you'd better eat right away and we'll go, Billy said and ran to his room to gather all the necessary textbooks for tomorrow. He might have to spend the night at one of his friends or his grandmother's house tonight. He would deal with that later. While he was thinking about where to send Leslie and how to make sure she didn't have to spend the night tonight. In 10 minutes, Billy had already packed everything he needed. Leslie had time to change her clothes and wash the dishes behind her. Then they hurried to the exit. As they left the driveway, Leslie sobbed again and pointed toward a large road where a man and a woman were engaged in a strange activity. The man would take 2 or 3 steps and fall to the ground, and the woman would try to pick him up, but she was unsuccessful. Then she'd turn to persuasion. True, you can't hear what the mother says to the drunken father from here, but the content of the conversation is clear to their children. Billy took his sister's hand and hurried to get out of sight quickly before the drunken father saw him. The mother seemed to see them and discreetly made a gesture with her hand for them to hurry. They managed to quickly hide behind the bushes in the yard and from there watch what was happening. The father fell many more times until he reached the front door of the driveway. The mother would not calm down. Harvey, come on, it's just a little bit left to go home. You're strong, you can do it. Harvey, instead of getting to his apartment faster, said something inappropriate and even tried to sing some songs. From the outside, it seemed that this man's drunkenness only concerned his woman. Drunk Harvey didn't care about anything. He was fine. Even if he falls asleep somewhere under the fence, he has a caring and loving wife, Selena, who will find him and bring him home at any cost. And it doesn't matter that this whole picture causes their children great shame in front of their friends and peers in the yard. And it doesn't matter that this kind of care Selena has been unleashing on her husband for years now. And it does not matter that the son and daughter are completely left to themselves. But despite this, they have grown up to be amazingly diligent and intelligent children. And the fact that in the future neither their diligence nor their intelligence will save their well-being never bothers their parents. Billy and Leslie spent the rest of the day in the park behind the garages playing with their friends. Evening came, by which time all of their friends were starting to go home. Billy was embarrassed to once again ask one of them for a sleepover. He was thinking more about Leslie. He had 2 options: to take her to her grandmother's house, where she wouldn't make it to her first class tomorrow, or to leave her at home, where she didn't want to go and was already sobbing. Billy, as always, hoped for the best and chose the second option. When they got home, the mother was sitting on the balcony doing her usual thing. As soon as she saw her children, she quickly took both of them by the hands, led them into the kitchen, locked the door from the inside, and began to scold them in a whisper. "Where do you go all day long? Didn't I tell you to stay home from school? The neighborhood kids played for an hour and went home, but where have you been?" Selena glared menacingly at her children one by one. That she was mean, they realized without her scolding. Selena is always angry when she has to spend a long time searching the neighborhood for her husband Harvey and then dragging him home, coaxing him nearly unconscious. The kids realized this as early as lunchtime when they got home from school. More specifically, Billy had figured it out back at school, when his mother had failed to show up for the ceremonial lineup. He had hoped that at least at home, he would be able to present a gift from the principal and show off his diploma. But the situation at home does not change from year to year. He was sure that now no diploma and no gift would help Selena to become a little kinder and more attentive to her children. While the mother was reprimanding her children, a loud, incomprehensible voice came from the parents' bedroom. It seems that tonight's scenario is now no secret to anyone. A moment later, the kitchen door opened and a swollen Harvey stood at the entrance. "Oh, there are our children. Mother, where have they been all day?" asked the drunken father. "Well, I'm busy figuring that out right now," Selena said with a tremor in her voice. "Billy, you're not living up to my expectations. It's a shame. I wanted to raise my son to be a real man, and he's growing up to be something he's not," Harvey said, walked over to the refrigerator, looked at it, and slammed the door loudly. Billy stood in the corner, trying to be as close to Leslie as possible, and mentally wondered what he was going to be guilty of today. He went over all of his father's recent accusations this month, but his father's resourcefulness was ahead of his memory this time too. "You asked for a puppy. We got you a puppy. Where is he? Animals are a responsibility. And my son's responsibility is very bad. Otherwise, Mother, how do you explain that he couldn't even tame a dog?" Harvey said, setting himself up for an interminably long conversation about a puppy from 3 years ago. Billy was offended, and once again, he couldn't stand his emotions. "Daddy, you threw that puppy out of the balcony. I wanted to save him. I would have gotten him out. You wouldn't even let me pick him up on the ground. But you're still accusing me of killing our puppy. Don't you dare cross your father." Harvey pounded on the table, and then he continued his pointless monologue. "Mother, it's your upbringing. You see, your son is still a green kid, but he dares to teach his father. Dad, I'm telling it like it is. Why do you make up trivial excuses just to scold us?" Billy squeezed out all his resentment, but his mother immediately pulled him back and pushed him to the side, making him realize that the best tactic in this case was to silently tolerate and agree with his father. "Where are all the flowers?" Leslie wanted flowers. Her mother bought some and planted them in a pot. "You don't even know how to water 3 bushes properly." Now the father transferred his senseless claims to his daughter. Leslie was already crying quietly by this point, and when the father began his onslaught, she started sobbing. But she also knows very well that she will get even more for crying. So she tried her best to keep all her emotions inside her. It was noticeable, by the way. She was almost choking on her tears, and her hands were shaking. These pointless educational conversations, as Harvey called them, lasted until midnight. The hungry, tired children had only one regret, that they had wasted a sleepover at their friend's house and had come to their own. Selena occasionally backed up her husband's nonsensical accusations and busied herself on the balcony. Both Billy and Leslie are sure that if their mother had wanted to end this publicanization, she would have done so long ago. They all their conscious life cannot understand why the mother allows the drunken father constantly morally abuse their children and torment them with completely empty reproaches. There is still a childish naivety in them, thanks to which they both do not lose hope that someday Selena will stand up for their defense and all this nightmare will end. But Billy is 16 years old and Leslie is 13 years old, and they can't wait for that moment. 2 years have passed and Billy's graduation day is approaching. He is waiting for this day with excitement because he is graduating with a gold medal. Of course, at this celebration, he wants to see his parents, their pride and joy for their son. This time, Billy is sure that his father will definitely be happy about this achievement of his son, and everything will go differently. Finally, the day has come. Billy beautifully styled his hair with gel. Selena put on her best dress. Before the graduation, the father of the family did not drink for 3 days and was ready to participate in an important family event. The awarding of the gold medal was the key event of this celebration. At this moment, some were envious of the medalist Billy, some were genuinely happy. Harvey was happy too. It was noticeable by the fact that he was already drunk by the time the ceremonial part of the event began. The younger students showed their musical numbers, singing and dancing. Parents sat in the hall right behind the teachers. At the next performance of the younger pupils, one of the adults came on stage and started dancing with them. The hall immediately burst into laughter. Billy turned his head and could not believe his eyes. Harvey had once again surpassed his expectations and was dancing on the stage among the school children. He got up from his seat and ran to his mother, who only shrugged her shoulders and tried to calm her son down. Billy was ashamed of his father's behavior. The whole hall laughs at him, and he continues to dance in a drunken frenzy. After a while, Billy went up to his mother and said, "Mom, take your father home before he does something else. I tried, he won't. He wants to thank your teachers for you. We'll sit for a while and then we'll go," said Selena. Billy was now at peace. Dancing on stage wasn't all his father's talent. He might do something else before the end of the event. This isn't a restaurant where alumni and parents can let their emotions run wild. While everyone is still in school, the events are strictly supervised by the principal and all the teachers. No one is supposed to behave freely in this place. But Harvey doesn't seem to care about such rules. In the middle of the event, the students performed a white swan dance. The children twirled around in white outfits with wings on their backs. At this point, the audience in the auditorium became animated again. Harvey was creative again and literally dragged the literature teacher Betty to the white dance by force. She resented and resisted as much as she could, but Harvey was not going to back down. He forcefully dragged the teacher right to the center of the stage and began to twirl her in a white dance. Betty hid her face in shame in front of the students. Billy covered his eyes with his hands and wished he could fall under the ground right now and not come out until all this shame was over and erased from people's minds. Selena seemed to notice her son's embarrassment and headed for the stage as well. As she jostled with the dancing children, she tried to explain something to her husband and get him off the stage, but he roughly pushed her away. She fell right on the stage. Billy couldn't take it anymore and ran to his mother's aid. The school principal also ran to help. Thus, an innocent children's dance turned into one family's desperate struggle with the participation of educators. The school principal tried to explain to Harvey that it is not appropriate for a parent to behave like this in front of the children, but in response she heard foul language. In the end, no one was able to reach an agreement with the drunken Harvey. He struggled to return to his seat in the audience, but continued to demand that the festivities continue. The brightest day that Billy had waited for all year became the worst day for him. For the rest of the event, Harvey took turns approaching the teachers, bragging about how he had raised such a smart son, hugging and kissing them. After the event was over, Harvey was no longer able to understand words or stand on his own 2 feet. He was taken out of the school auditorium with great difficulty, but he sat down in the yard near the main entrance and continued to talk incoherent nonsense. Next to him, as always, was Selena, so helpless and so driven by her husband's inadequate behavior. Billy watched what was happening from the window of his classroom and made a plan on how to escape unnoticed from the company of his classmates, who were going to move on to the celebration of their holiday. At that moment, his teacher Lucy entered the classroom. She immediately turned to Billy. "Billy, come with me," she said in a commanding tone. She usually called Billy by his first name, so this familiarity did not surprise Billy now. After all the teachers were now angry about his parents' behavior. Lucy led him to the principal's office. When he entered the principal's office, he saw that almost all of his teachers were sitting at the desk. Billy couldn't raise his eyes and face them out of shame. He stepped over the threshold into the office and stood guiltily in the corner where the closet stood. "Billy," the school principal addressed him. Billy continued to stand silent and stare at the floor. "Billy, from the very first days that you stepped into this school, you have been a diligent student. You mastered all subjects well and never upset your teachers with your behavior. Today's gold medal is your well-deserved achievement. We want to congratulate you once again on this success, and we are sure that in the future you will become an excellent specialist, and what is important, a man with a capital letter." The principal said these words, and the seated teachers joined them. It seemed that the principal wanted to say something else, but then she stammered a little and handed the speech to Betty. Betty stood up and said, "Billy, you stand on the threshold of adulthood like all of your peers. We would like you to enter this adulthood with confidence. Perhaps some of the events of today upset you a lot, but you must understand that children are not responsible for the actions and behavior of their parents. We always knew that you had to overcome some difficulties in your family. Even as a child, you coped with these trials with dignity and managed to show yourself only from the best side. So, let today's event not overshadow your joy today. You should think about your future and let it be beautiful," said Betty. Billy was touched to the core. He expected the teachers to be upset with his parents' behavior, but instead they made it clear that they understood him. This act of support really had a positive effect on Billy. But the shame of having such people as his parents and knowing about their behavior, even the teachers knew about it, constantly gnawed at Billy's soul. The gold medal gave Billy the right to enter any prestigious educational institution without any obstacles. From childhood, he dreamed of becoming a financier, so he had no problems with the choice of profession. He successfully passed all the last exams and began to slowly get ready to go to the city. His father, of course, insisted that Billy should study at the engineering high school in their town. His mother, as always, had no opinion on the matter, but Billy realized that his place was in one of the most prestigious universities in the capital. Therefore, he did not emphasize his parents' position. Only he was madly worried about Leslie. How would she now cope with the familiar reality without her brother's support? She had practically grown up in Billy's arms, and at school, he had always looked out for her. Leslie realized that too, but she tried to pretend that she could manage on her own. The day Billy left, Leslie walked him to the bus station. They drove in silence. Billy saw Leslie wiping tears from her face with the corner of his eye. When Daddy's drunk or Mommy's mad at you, you don't have to be afraid, and you don't have to put up with their attacks. Just get your stuff and go to Grandma's. I told her everything again, even though she already knows everything. You're older now, you're more visible. Take care of yourself, and try not to spend the night at your friends' or girlfriends' houses. You'll be safer at Grandma's, Billy said. Leslie continued to sob and was no longer hiding her tears. Both know that Leslie is pretty much on her own now. Grandma, though she knows about her son's family's problems, can't help much. Billy and Leslie intuitively guessed that only Mom can solve this problem. But Selena had never had a strong character to protect the children and put her husband in his place, and there was not even a hint of it. The only idea that lived in her was that she loved her Harvey and intended to continue to serve him at all costs. She doesn't realize that she has power over this weak man, and that if she tries hard enough, she can stop this ugly lifestyle where she follows his every move and listens to his delusions. Even after almost 20 years of living together and the same duration of his drinking, Selena has not realized that it is useless to fall for the words and behavior of a drinking man. She persists in persuading her drunken husband not to swear in the street, to find the strength to somehow get home, not to get angry and hear her. She spends all her energy on this. She ends up feeling completely devastated. Inside herself, she left nothing for her children. All her care, warmth and tenderness was given to her husband, who didn't really need it all. That is why Leslie and Billy remember about their mother only her anger and nagging on every occasion. They are both not used to counting on her support and understanding. If Billy benefited from it, as he grew up a strong man, but for Leslie it turned out to be a tragedy. But while no one knows about it, Leslie is still just a teenager. Gather all your strength in your fist and be patient for just 3 years. I'll get a job as soon as I get into town. As soon as you graduate, you can go to school. If there's anything you need, write to me. I'll give you my address. And please be strong, Billy said and kissed his sister on the forehead goodbye. As soon as he arrived in the city, Billy applied to one of the prestigious universities. He was gladly accepted. He would study at the expense of the budget, and for the first time he could live in a dormitory. Having solved all these questions in a few days, Billy decided not to waste time and found a job at the nearest supermarket. He would be able to get his first paycheck before the school year started. He had already divided it. Half of it he would give to his mother to buy everything Leslie needed, and the other half he would leave for his own expenses. But the hardest part was Leslie. In the absence of her brother, she tried to find support from her mother. But Leslie suddenly found that her mother was like a stranger to her. There was no warmth between them, no attraction. This made her even more depressed. She remembers recently dreaming of having the same close relationship with her mother as all her friends. She compared her life to that of her friend Elizabeth. Elizabeth can tell her mother everything. She can even ask her to buy something and she does. They can even joke with their mom and their mom laughs. Elizabeth's mom is aware of all her secrets, and when she needs it, she gets support from her. Also, Elizabeth's mom often makes compliments, from which Elizabeth instantly blossoms, and Leslie sadly lowers her eyes and sighs quietly. All of Leslie's attempts have been to little avail. Mom was ready to communicate with her daughter only on domestic topics, and that, when Leslie tried to give her childish support, Selena was annoyed and quickly transferred the topic of conversation. This was a new blow to Leslie's growing up psyche. Her grades deteriorated. No matter how much she remembered her brother's advice and tried to study hard, it was as if her brain was completely disobeying her. Her attention was constantly scattered and drifting off into the distance. In her childish naivete, she decided to talk to her mother about it. "Mom, for some reason it's getting hard for me to understand the lessons. I read everything, but I can't understand anything. What should I do?" Leslie asked. "Then you're not reading carefully. When you read, you have to think about what you're reading. And your thoughts are somewhere out there, flying in the clouds. What, you're thinking about boys already?" Selena cut her off harshly. Leslie's still childish psyche took these words as another insult. Yes, there is a boy she likes, but Leslie is absolutely sure that he will never pay attention to her, and she wouldn't even think about socializing or dating him. She was really concerned about her grades, but her mom, instead of helping her daughter, had driven her deeper into a dead end. Added to Leslie's depressed state were feelings of shame and guilt. However, Selena was not much different from many mothers. Not every mother realizes that a growing daughter is still her child, and a child in her teens needs the attention of her adult loved ones even more. And this need for attention is much greater than even in infancy. But for some reason, most women who become mothers of daughters as if completely forget that they themselves come from adolescence. After a series of these conversations, Leslie felt a deep despair. She was filled with great fear. If she didn't do well in her studies, her final grades would be bad. With those grades, she'd never get in. And if she doesn't get in, she'll end up living with her parents for the rest of her life. After a few more days, Leslie found out that she absolutely did not want to see her peers and school in general. Now she has a new habit, leaving the house early in the morning, but not going to school. She would go anywhere just to pass the time. She started breaking up with her friends. She didn't even want to go to her grandmother's house. But Grandma turned out to be a little wiser than her mother, although the grandmother did not know what depression in teenagers is. But she immediately noticed the changes in her granddaughter's behavior. "If you want, you can always come to my house, but you can't skip school. If your father finds out about it, you'll be in trouble again," Grandma said. "But I still don't have the strength to study, Grandma. I don't understand anything. I can't learn anything. If I go to school like this, I'll only get more F's. I'd rather not be there at all than get D's and embarrass Billy," Leslie said. staring blankly out the window. Grandmother realized from her granddaughter's downcast look that her frustration was serious. She allowed Leslie to stay with her for a few days, and she told her wayward son Harvey and wimpy daughter-in-law Selena that she needed Leslie for housework. They didn't object. Leslie spent all day long lying staring at the ceiling. She refused to eat, slept badly at night, and often woke up with nightmares. Her grandmother was concerned about her condition, but people of her generation were not familiar with such solutions as antidepressants or psychologists' services. So she patiently continued to persuade her granddaughter to return to her old life. A couple days later, her friend Elizabeth came to Leslie's house. She asked her grandmother's permission if she could go to the movies with Leslie after lunch. Grandma even got excited. Maybe that way Leslie could finally get out of this state. But Leslie was very indifferent to her friend's suggestion. When her grandmother and Elizabeth began to persuade her to go to the movies with her friend, then she burst out with emotions. "So tell me, Grandma, that you're sick of me too. I know that no one has ever needed me. Why do I need this kind of life? I'd rather die than live like this." Leslie was really hysterical. Elizabeth left her bewildered. Grandmother thought that Leslie was showing her forming character in this way. All in father went, she thought, and did not give importance to the words of her granddaughter. That same night in the morning, Grandma heard Leslie leave her room and go into the bathroom. Once again, Grandma didn't pay much attention to this little thing. She decided to get another hour of sleep, since she planned to take Leslie to the store in the morning to get something. Maybe it would distract her and put her in a better mood. Waking up, Grandma decided to wake Leslie up and have breakfast together. When she opened the bedroom door, she didn't see her granddaughter there. Maybe she'd gone to school after all, or gone home to her parents. She thought she should call and find out. Then she headed for the bathroom. When she opened the door, Grandma almost fainted at what she saw. Leslie was sitting on the floor and making sobbing noises. Grandma walked over and lifted her head, foam appearing in the corners of her mouth. Her face was blue and her body was almost lifeless. Grandma, with shaky legs, barely made it to the phone to call an ambulance. While the ambulance was on its way, she floundered on the landing from one neighbor to another. The ambulance arrived quickly, and Leslie was rushed to the hospital. Her grandmother was about to go to pick her up. Only before she left, she remembered to call her son and daughter-in-law. No matter how many times she dialed, neither Selena nor Harvey picked up. A couple of hours after her hospitalization, the doctor informed Grandma that Leslie had gotten drunk on pills and wanted to quietly pass away. The grandmother clutched at her heart. The doctor advised her to immediately see a specialist, such as a psychologist. The grandmother, of course, did not understand what this specialist does and how to find him. The doctor also asked about Leslie's parents. When the grandmother told him that the father was a drunkard and the mother was voluntarily completely at his mercy, leaving not a single drop of energy for her children, the doctor shook his head. It became clear to him that the problem with his family was not just the drinking father, it was much deeper than that. Leslie had come to her senses and was now begging her grandmother not to tell her parents all this. She realized that in the next few days her father would get drunk again, and she would get a lot of unpleasant words. If her mother found out, she would be even more furious at her daughter's antics. The child was absolutely certain that nothing could change her parents. The grandmother knew her son and her daughter-in-law too well, so she went along with Leslie and agreed not to tell her parents anything about it. They weren't particularly interested. Selena was calm that Leslie was at her grandmother's house and she would take care of her. In 2 days, Leslie was ready to be discharged. The doctor realized that the grandmother alone could not do much about her granddaughter's depression. That's why he brought his colleague psychotherapist himself and asked him to prescribe the right pills. Already after a week, Leslie began to gradually come to her senses. She felt that she missed her friends and her parents too. Her grandmother took her to the store and bought some beautiful dresses. After saying a warm goodbye to her grandmother and apologizing for her emotional act, Leslie returned home again. As hard as it was for her, the close contact with her own death had changed her a lot. She became stronger. Her maturation process has accelerated. Now she's determined to do whatever it takes to finish school and help her brother. And then there's a new life. What kind of life? I don't care what it is, as long as I don't have to see that drunken face and that angry and unhappy mother running around. A person, no matter how much he wants the most beautiful conditions for himself, in fact, can also perfectly adapt to everything bad. Therefore, Selene did not realize that she and her husband had long ago become hostages to the dark sides of each other's souls. Usually in a dark space, a person is not able to notice that there is a way out somewhere. So the next 8 years passed unnoticed. No fundamental changes in the life of Harvey and Selena did not happen, except for the fact that Selena is increasingly ill and sometimes cannot get out of bed for weeks. Leslie had long ago left for the city, went wherever she wanted to go, and finished her studies quite successfully. Then she got a job, and then she got a promotion. In that time alone, she had managed to get married and divorced twice. Billy had been working since the first days of his arrival in town and had never known a day's rest. He successfully combined work with his studies. By the time he graduated, he had already made a name for himself in a private company. He made a brilliant career and achieved a certain financial stability. When he met Julia on his way, Billy had no doubt that this girl was his destiny. Therefore, he did not bother to think for a long time, and they modestly married after 3 months of acquaintance. By the time their eldest son Tom was born, they had their own spacious apartment. Billy never hid from Julia that he was always worried about his parents, especially his mother. Therefore, when he proposed to go to his parents with little Tom, she agreed with joy. By the time Billy arrived, Mom was in bed. Harvey was now allowed to get drunk and lie under every fence without any restrictions. Even though Selena was no longer able to run after him and drag him home all the time, she still continued to worry more about her husband than herself. Billy used to come to the family home every year too. But this time, for the first time, he noticed that his mother had aged noticeably. His father was as healthy as ever, so he didn't think of changing his lifestyle. He's doing just fine. After staying a couple of days, Billy made an important offer to his parents. He would take them to his house. His father would go to a drug treatment center. His mother would be seen by the best doctors and put on her feet. During this time, Billy promised to make repairs in the apartment. After full recovery, if the parents want to return to their house, they can do so. Selena, as before, was not able to make her own decisions, and so she watched her husband's reaction. Harvey, of course, wasn't going to change anything in his life. Besides, he was against Billy taking Selena to the city. He wasn't even convinced by his wife's serious condition. What are those doctors gonna do for her? They'll prescribe all sorts of chemicals, and it's a waste of money. Harvey still underestimated the danger to Selena's life. Billy and Julia had to spend several days of futile persuasion. When they both realized that reasonable arguments were not working on Harvey, they decided to leave him to his own devices. But Billy could not leave his sick mother without proper care and support. The next day, Julia packed her mother-in-law's things and they set out on their journey. When they arrived in town, Billy immediately took his mother to the doctor. The tests revealed a whole bunch of chronic diseases. Billy decided that with such diagnoses, he could not send his mother back home, where she would once again spend all her energy and strength on completely useless care for his father. After being discharged from the hospital, Julia took full responsibility for Selena's care. Not a month later, Harvey's neighbors started calling Billy and Selena. They complained that Harvey was bringing in personal drunks to the apartment, or debauchery in the yard, or fights with one of the neighbors. Eventually, the police took him away. Billy decided not to interfere with his father's choices, but Selena couldn't get over the news. God willing, I'll get better and go home right away. My Harvey's probably waiting for me. It'll be cold soon. God forbid he should fall asleep under a fence and ruin his health, Selena repeated day and night. Mom, Dad's a grown man. If he drinks and falls asleep under the fence, he should feel all the consequences of such a lifestyle. But for now, in your 30+ years of life, you've never let him feel the full extent of his downfall. That's why it never once occurred to him to stop drinking. So you've lost your own health, and he doesn't give a damn. You still can't understand that a person's way of life is his choice, and everyone has to take responsibility for his choice, Billy said. But for Selena, these words were unconvincing. As soon as she got a little stronger, she immediately began to insist that Billy send her home. She was not even stopped by her small and affectionate grandson Tom, who had already grown very fond of his grandmother. Not even Leslie, who had recently divorced her drunken second husband and was still in dire need of a mother's support and understanding, could stop her. Billy had to let his mother go home again, but his heart was restless for her. He decided that he would make a surprise visit to his parents' home in a couple of months and see if anything had changed in his parents' lifestyle. Before he left, he stopped by his neighbor Aubrey's house with a small gift, told her briefly about what was going on in their family, and asked her to keep an eye on Selena. Not half a month later, Aubrey called to say that Selena had suffered a seizure and had been taken to the hospital. At that moment, Leslie was visiting Billy and Julia. After hearing the unpleasant news, she decided to go to her parents' house with her brother. When they arrived, her mother was in the hospital, and Harvey was enjoying his free life as usual with obscure companions on the street. The doctor reported that Selena's illness was progressing. She needed good care after treatment. This time, Billy was determined to take his mother back to his house and not let her back in under any circumstances. He again offered his father to come with them, but as usual, he didn't see the need for it. Besides, he still didn't think Selena needed to go anywhere either. The protracted family arguments turned into an emotional showdown. The stubbornness of parents first of all upset Leslie. The final straw was her father's words when he told them the following: "If you're so worried about your mother, then one of you stay by her side and take care of her. And for a long time, no one cooks hot meals for me, no one to run to the store for kefir in the morning. That'll come in handy," he said. "Dad, Mom's done nothing but run after you all her life. You could at least respect her health by going with her. We don't hope that you'll finally get your mind right and go to a drug counselor," Leslie said. "Why would I want to see a drug counselor? They're the ones that all the drunks go to. I know my norm. When I need to, I can stop drinking without problems. And now times are hard. Your mother is sick. It's hard for me to see all this. I'd find peace only in a shot," said Harvey, and again reached into the refrigerator for a bottle. "Dad, are you serious? You seriously could stop drinking at any time, but you don't do it for our entire conscious life. Mom ruined her health because of you. You're the reason she didn't have the energy for us when we were kids. It's because of you that she ruined her health," Leslie told me. "And you do not interfere in our relationship with my mother. You should have brought up your own children and your husband. Instead, you jump from one man to another." Father ruthlessly pressed on Leslie's sore spot. By the way, Leslie's first love, Arthur, turned out to be an inveterate gambler. She for a long time could not find the strength to divorce him until Billy intervened. After a while, Leslie met Tony, who turned out to be a very delicate and gentle young man. But a couple of months after the wedding, it turned out that he has a terrible addiction to alcoholic beverages. Leslie once again found herself being held hostage like her mother. This time she fell back into a terrible depression, just as she had in her teens. By this time, Leslie already knew her tendency to depression and was terribly afraid of it. She had already read that through depression, a person's soul wants to tell them that they are on the wrong path. Leslie pulled herself together and realized that living with an alcoholic was clearly not what she wanted to spend her life on. Regardless, she filed for divorce from Tony. Billy and Julia supported her in this, as they knew this fate all too well. And now Leslie is already scared to start a new relationship. She is not sure that she will be able to choose a normal person without any heavy addictions. That's why she goes to a psychologist, and the psychologist pointed out the roots of her problems. In Leslie's inner world, there is no image of a happy family. She has an idea about the sacrifice of a woman and the boundless selfishness of a man. That's why she creates exactly this kind of relationship again and again. And now her father, who is the protagonist of her such fate, dares to accuse her of this. Leslie decided not to miss the opportunity and speak out everything she has failed to do in her entire life. In fact, it's because of you and my mother that my personal life doesn't work out. You're the ones who failed to instill in us the image of a happy family. What I got from you was a knack for getting into ugly situations. Now don't you dare blame me for that. It's really on your conscience, Leslie said and cried. Of course, Harvey thought it was all nonsense. In the end, Billy and Leslie decided to take Selena back to their house, leaving her father to his own devices, his old way of life. Upon arriving in town, Selena quickly went on the mend. Julia cared for her as if she were her own mother, but the doctor warned that the improvement might be temporary. By this point, Julia had given birth to their second son, who they named Mickey. Their oldest son, Tom, had already gone to school. Selena often calls her husband in Billy and Julia's absence. She wouldn't mind going away again, but the children won't let her go. He'd be lost without me. He's old. He's not in good health. If something happens to him, there's no one around, Selena sobs sometimes. Mom, you've given him your whole life. You've given him more care and attention than you ever gave Leslie and me. And what do you get in return? You think he's gonna give you a peaceful old age. You want to pick him up in the neighbors' yards and carry him home to his grave. Billy says to her, "Don't say that about him. Whatever he is, he's your father. He's actually a very good man. Only he's got a lot of heartache in him. His mother, your grandmother, never got on well with him. She'd always hurt him and thought he was nothing. Your father, as a well-mannered man, absorbed it all. He couldn't rest, so he sought solace in the bottle, and Selena continued to defend her husband." About these words, Billy agrees with his mother. He has been talking to different experts about the causes and effects of alcoholism for a long time. They tell him that alcohol addiction develops in those who do not know how to express their emotions when sober. Instead of growing up and learning to control their mental trauma, they prefer to flood it with alcohol and continue to nurture it. Also, experts said that alcoholics maintain such a life, helped by their female loved ones. In particular, it is either a mother or a wife. In Harvey's case, he was helped by both women, his mother and his wife. In order for an alcoholic to stop drinking, he must get out of this cycle and feel the consequences of his bad habit. In the end, Selena persuaded Billy to just go to his father and visit him. She promised that she wouldn't stay with him and would come back. When Billy and Selena arrived home, a complete stranger opened the door. "Who are you here to see?" a young woman with a baby in her arms asked. In the meantime, Billy could see that the apartment was nicely renovated and smelled cozy. A television was playing loudly in one of the rooms, and a man was talking loudly on the phone. For a moment, Billy thought he had gotten the address wrong. Actually, he hadn't gotten anything wrong. "Where's Harvey, the owner of this apartment?" Billy asked. "Oh, you mean the former owners of this apartment? They moved out a long time ago. We bought this apartment," the young woman said. "What do you mean you bought it? How could you buy it without my consent?" Selena asked. "We bought it from the bank, and they told us that the owners had mortgaged the apartment and had defaulted on the loan." Now Billy realized that his father had actually mortgaged the apartment, taken the money, and disappeared. and there was no way to get the apartment back. Only Selena was inconsolable. She spent the whole day making Billy walk around the usual courtyards, where Harvey could sit with his companions and drink alcohol. But nowhere of the usual habitats could they find him. So they went to the police station, but he wasn't getting there either. They even checked the city morgue. No sign of him there either. So Harvey is alive, with money and no special problems. Hardly calming his mother, Billy took her back to his place in town. As time passed, there was no word from Harvey. As the time counted down the years, Billy realized that he needed to rid his mother of her empty hopes. He managed to convince her that Harvey was most likely not alive and that they should hold a formal funeral wake and let him go. By then, Selena herself was tired of waiting, so she agreed without much difficulty. After that, indeed, her life became easier afterward. She learned to enjoy life, pay attention to her grandchildren, and put her health first. Julia still took excellent care of her mother-in-law. They even managed a couple of times to go on a joint vacation with their children and improve their health. Recently, Selena started going to church a lot. At least she told her children so. The children were not against it. On the contrary, supported her in it. Thankfully, the church was not far from home. One morning, Selena got ready to go to church again. A few minutes after she left, Julia realized she needed to go to the store. She picked up a large cart of groceries at the store and stood in line at the checkout looking out the window. Suddenly, she saw her mother-in-law walking by the store. Julia was surprised, for she had said she was going to church. But the church was just the other way around. Julia was curious. She paid at the store, went out and decided to follow her mother-in-law cautiously. At the nearest stop, her mother-in-law got into a cab and headed off in an unknown direction. Julia took a second cab and followed her. Stuck in traffic and circling the city, the cab arrived at the outskirts of the city. You could say that these places are considered slums. There are old houses, garbage everywhere, and heating pipes behind them. Selena let the cab go and went straight to the heating pipes. Julia kept up with her, but didn't catch her eye. Passing through the narrow yards, Selena came to a group of homeless people sitting near the heat pipe around a fire. It was the perfect place for the homeless to safely survive the winter. But why had Selena come here across town? Julia decided to creep closer. What was her surprise when she found a painfully familiar face in the company of the homeless? It was Harvey. She and Selena greeted each other warmly, sat down with them, laid out their gifts on a table of old crates, and talked animatedly with them. Now Julia realized that her mother-in-law probably didn't go to church. She had somehow found her beloved husband, who had taken a considerable sum of money from the bank and was wandering around freely. Apparently, she was afraid of Billy and Leslie's anger, so she didn't tell them anything about it. Julia thought long and hard about whether or not to tell Billy. In the end, she decided that it would be better if Billy saw it for himself. Once again, when Selena announced that she was going to church tomorrow, Julia and Billy decided to watch her. And once again, they were convinced that indeed Selena was going to visit Harvey's slum heater. That evening, Billy decided to talk to his mother about it. Selena denied it at first, convincing her son that he had obviously mistaken someone for her. "Mom, it's absurd. How could I confuse my own parents with someone else? I saw with my own eyes that it was you, and you went to meet your father. And he's probably making friends with the homeless and hanging out by the heating duct. Why didn't you tell us this before?" Billy asked. "I know you and Leslie don't like him. I didn't want to upset you, but I can't leave him. I'm worried about him. What if something happens to him on the street?" said Selena with a guilty look. "Mom, we never said we didn't love our father. Leslie and I have been hurt all our lives that he couldn't show his love for us when we needed it so badly. Come on, that's all in the past. We're adults now, and we have to act like adults. Let's go over there together and take him home. There's plenty of room for everyone, but you won't have to run to the other side of town, and your father will be warm," said Billy. It was a surprise to Selena. Of course, she was glad. That same afternoon in the evening, she and Billy headed over to the warming station to take Harvey in to see him. Admittedly, he had changed a lot over the years. For one thing, he had aged considerably. Street life had taken its toll on him. Instead of a well-fed man, Billy saw a shrunken and gaunt older man in front of him. Billy wanted to hug him, but Harvey was a little embarrassed and pulled back. The acrid odor of dirt immediately hit his nose. At home, he was sent straight to the bathroom. While he washed there, Billy took all of his belongings out of the apartment and threw them in the trash. Washed, trimmed, and dressed in clean clothes, Harvey finally felt like a man too. A couple days later, Billy sat his father across from him and again suggested that he see a drug counselor. Of course, his father still didn't think he was an alcoholic and promised that he wouldn't drink now. Billy decided to give him that chance and wait a while. Leslie during this period was again going through a breakup with a new young man. Their relationship had lasted about 2 years. Leslie insisted on getting married, and the young man kept taking his time. Billy and Julia advised not to hurry with marriage and better to look more closely at this young man. Leslie did so. She only had to watch him closely for a couple of weeks to find out that in fact the young man is already married, and he is just deceiving her. She is again on the verge of depression, but already by experience knows how to cope with this state. True, she now has a strong conviction that all her failed relationships are to blame for her childhood traumas. No matter how many psychologists she goes to, there are no practical results. For a while it seems that she has learned not to accept neglect, but as soon as she enters into a relationship, she immediately turns into an obsequious girl who is ready to tolerate everything for the sake of a man. As much as she was bitter to realize it, but in this she followed her mother. Therefore, she rarely visited her parents and tried to spend more time at work. Her parents remind her of her failed relationships, and she's had quite a few. One day, Julia stated to Billy that she couldn't find her gold jewelry in the apartment. Billy didn't pay much attention to these words. He thought it was typical female inattention. Most likely, she had put her jewelry somewhere and couldn't remember. Sometime later, Billy's expensive watch disappeared from the apartment. Now he's lost his peace. He only takes it off occasionally when he's at home. He told Julia about it. She only shrugged her shoulders in response. Billy's summer vacation was approaching. He had been working for years without a vacation, so this year he could finally relax with his family. He and Julia had planned an overseas trip, with Selena and Harvey staying in charge at home. The vacation went off without a hitch. Millie and Julia, along with their children, returned tanned and refreshed. But at home, a strange mystery was waiting for them again. This time, several things were missing from the house. They were an expensive souvenir vase that Billy's business partners had given them for their wedding, a rare painting, and Billy's branded commemorative pen. Billy asked his parents if anyone had come to the house while they were gone. Turns out, no strangers had ever set foot in the house. But Billy didn't like this series of mystery stories. He thought maybe some strange thieves had climbed in through the balcony. Just in case, he decided to install security cameras at home. The next time Julia's branded handbag went missing, it wasn't hard to spot the thief. It was Harvey. Billy realized that no amount of educational talk would fix an elderly addict. Apparently, the money Billy gave his father for pocket money did not allow him to buy the necessary amount of alcohol. Billy thought about it, consulted with knowledgeable people, and made a decision. Most likely, this decision will be taken by his parents in a huff. As always, Selena will stand up for her husband and protect him. Billy certainly loves and respects his father, and he loves his mother no less. Therefore, he wishes that at least in old age, they lived normally, not playing the big kid and his eternal sacrifice. In order not to embarrass his father in front of his grandchildren, Billy decided to organize this conversation outside the house. He invited his parents to a restaurant. Billy was going to have a non-alcoholic dinner, but Harvey showed up already tipsy. He spent the rest of the evening asking for and demanding more drinks. "Daddy, you have to know that we love you very much, that your mother loves you, but you should hear us. You deserve to live the rest of your life with dignity. To do that, you need to get rid of your alcohol addiction." Billy started the conversation. "Here we go. I know what I have to do. I don't have any addiction. It's how I calm my nerves. A couple of shots with a good appetizer, and my mood is normal. And you want to deprive me of this little joy of life?" Harvey insisted. All drinkers think that, but they don't realize how far they've gone in their self-deception. Don't try to fool yourself, father. You think your drinking habits won't hurt anyone. Let's face it, mom's been chasing you around and dragging you around all your life. You've drunk the apartment. You've slipped into homelessness, not to mention what you put us through as kids. It's got to end sometime, Billy said firmly. That's all I need, for you to make some more claims on me. I didn't drink the apartment. I wanted to do business, so I took money from the bank. So I lost money. Who cares? Stop talking about it. Harvey doesn't seem to realize what he's doing. All right, let's not talk about the past. Then we can talk about the present. 3 months ago, Julia's gold jewelry went missing. Then my watch went missing. When we came back from vacation, we noticed something missing from the house again. I had to install a security camera in the house. I thought until the last minute that maybe someone else had come to the house. But that's not what the camera showed. Billy said it looked his father in the eye. Selena realized that a big scandal was brewing, and it made her quickly assume her usual image of her husband's savior. "Billy, what are you saying? Are you accusing Dad of stealing? Maybe he needed the money? He's a man, and a man should always have money. In your absence, maybe he didn't want to bother you with these questions. You could have been understanding," Selena said. "Mother, when will you finally realize that you are not a mother to your husband, and he is not a child, but about 50 years old like an adult who should be aware of his actions and deeds? You are depriving him of that opportunity. That in this way you are taking care of him, but really you are nurturing his demons. Realize that you will be much better off if he comes to his senses and becomes a self-sufficient person. For that to happen, he needs to start thinking on his feet. And so you've spent your whole life sober, and you still can't realize it," Billy said. So what do you suggest?" Harvey asked when all other arguments were over. "I've already arranged with a good drug treatment clinic where my friend works as a doctor. We'll go there tomorrow and leave you there. You will receive a full course of treatment for alcohol addiction. The best doctors will work with you. There will be psychotherapy. You'll come out a new man. All you have to do is agree to it. And yes, your mother will not visit you during the treatment. Also, be prepared that after the treatment your relationship will be different. You will build it anew and in a different way. Adjust to that," Billy said. Harvey seemed to be thinking about something. He said that he would be gone for a while. When he left, Selena began her conversation again. "Billy, you should be nicer to your father. I've told you all along that he's hurting, but he's actually a very good man. He just can't act the way he wants to when he's sober. When he has a few drinks, he relaxes, and that's the only way he can open up. I've heard that people who quit drinking end up stale and unhappy. So I want him to think about his health too." Selena continued to defend him. "Mom, it's much harder for you to explain the truth than it is for your father. I'm telling you again that by pitying him, you're pushing him to drink. It's hard for you to understand because you hide it all under your care and custody. Please open your eyes and try to see him as an adult who can be there for you, even if you don't save him from his misery," Billy said. The very next day, Billy packed everything he needed for Harvey and took him to a drug treatment center across town. They were met by Billy's longtime friend Arthur. He is listed here as one of the best doctors. After all the formalities were formalized, Arthur invited Billy into his office. Don't worry about your father. We'll get him out of his addiction in no time. Only you need to be prepared to completely change his attitude towards him. In particular, this applies to closed women. They should think more about themselves and show less maternal care to an adult. Everyone around the former alcoholic must become self-sufficient people. Only when the adult is left to his own devices will he gradually begin to understand his responsibility, Dr. Arthur said. That's the thing, it's hard for my mom to let him go. Even when we were little, she chose adult care over little kids. I personally doubt she can change, but let's see. If you need anything, call me, Billy said lastly. While Harvey was undergoing treatment, Selena was bored alone. Julia suggested that she contact her friends and invite them on a trip that Billy could pay for. But it turned out that she didn't have any friends. So Selena decided to go to Leslie's house and live with her for a while. She was always resenting her mother for not paying attention to her. Now it was time to have a heart-to-heart talk and make up for lost time. Leslie gladly accepted the decision. That same evening, she took her mother to her house. After a series of failures, Leslie decided to take a break in her zeal to build a new relationship and is now fully committed to work. She is an architect by profession. Recently, on the advice of her brother, she opened her own small company and is actively engaged in its promotion. When Leslie was at work, her mother opened the refrigerator door and found that there was almost nothing edible in there. A couple of bottles with incomprehensible mixtures, a lot of greens, and different spices. Selena decided to really show some motherly concern. She went to the nearest supermarket and bought a lot of different foods. In the evening, a puffy pie with filling and homemade dumplings were ready for Leslie's arrival. Selena hoped that she and her daughter would have dinner together and have heart-to-heart conversations. She had spent the entire day picking up warm words she had never said to her daughter. Let her finally feel loved, she thought. In the evening, looking at the table set, Leslie gave it some thought and declared, "Mom, you go ahead and eat and don't mind me. I prefer a little different food," she said, and started to prepare dinner for herself. By dinner, Leslie meant a couple slices of dark bread, a big mound of chopped vegetables and herbs, drizzled with olive oil. That was it. Selena was horrified by the whole thing. What kind of food is this? Daughter, you must have seen all those skinny girls who are always dieting and eating nothing but grass. You don't need to lose weight. You already have a great figure. You'd better eat some dumplings, a piece of pie, and in the morning I'll make you some pancakes, Selena said. Mom, what does my figure have to do with it? I have a rare disease that manifests itself as an intolerance to anything containing white flour and dairy products. You just didn't know it before. I gave up pies, dumplings, pancakes, cakes, and everything else for 10 years. If you eat a lot of them, people have an increased tendency to become depressed. I've been down that road. I don't want to go back to it, said Leslie. The dinner together, although it took place, left some residue in the souls of both mother and daughter. The next weekend, Leslie decided to go shopping for her mother. They spent the whole day shopping and choosing outfits. And then it turned out that the tastes of mother and daughter do not coincide. If Leslie suggested something to her mother, she didn't like it. What the mother chose for her daughter did not suit her at all. After a few days, Selena decided to abandon her vain attempts to get closer to her daughter. It turned out that she was already a formed person with her own habits and lifestyle. One more free day, Selena decided to pass with a walk in the nearest park. There she met a woman of her own age with Sarah. The women talked about their fates and families. The next day, Sarah invited Selena to visit. It turned out that she has a son who works as a doctor and takes care of his mother. But his personal life is not getting better, sighed Sarah at the table. I have him quiet and calm, never liked the free way of life, one lover. He falls in love with one girl and is ready to give his life for her, even if she is a bitch. The last one was a bitch, and she gave him a lot of shit. Oh, I don't know what the final straw was, but I guess she betrayed my son. That's it, Sarah said of her son. Selena had a bright idea at that moment. Why not introduce this promising young doctor to Leslie? I wonder how she would feel about that. And Sarah was in favor with both hands. She promised to talk to her son tonight and let Selena know tomorrow. When Leslie came out of her office that evening, she was accosted by some respectable man with a bouquet in his hands. He kept claiming that the flowers were for her. It seemed to Leslie that this was a regular pickup artist who thought he had come up with a very original way to meet a girl. That's why she didn't believe the man's words. My name is Oliver. I work in a private practice as a surgeon. I think you thought I was some kind of a bum who only picks up girls on the street, Oliver smiled. Leslie was a little calmer now, but the flowers for a strange girl continued to embarrass her. Oliver turned out to be a calm but persistent man. He barely managed to convince Leslie to go out for coffee together. It was over coffee that they got to know each other better. At home, Selena waited for her daughter to tell her about the new acquaintance. Of course, she didn't tell her daughter that she was trying to fix her personal life behind her back. She would have taken it in stride anyway. But Leslie didn't tell her mom. Oliver now called and texted Leslie every day. She did not always find time to talk to him, but she did not refuse attention. After a while, Oliver proposed to Leslie to date and call themselves a couple. By this time, Leslie had a very positive image of Oliver in her head, so she agreed. But Leslie didn't tell her mother about it. Selena heard everything from Sarah's lips. She was glad that the mothers had managed to bring their children together. These days, Harvey is being discharged from drug treatment. Selena looked forward to that day. She was almost speechless when she saw her completely changed husband. Instead of a scruffy big egomaniac, a pleasant and tidy gentleman with rosy cheeks stood before her. The family that evening had a traditional dinner together, where Leslie was also present. Everyone was pleased. The next day, when Billy was sitting in his office, he was told that an elderly man had come to see him. He thought it was one of his business partners. He asked to invite the man into his office. A minute later, the office door opened and Harvey walked in. Billy obviously didn't expect such a surprise from his father. "Billy, my son, you will forgive me for almost all my life never taking an interest in your life. And now I see what a decent man you've become through your own efforts. I'm proud of you, son." The father hugged his son. "Dad, let's put the past in the past. At least I've grown up to be a real man." "You just take care of your mom now," Billy said. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Son, I'm an old man, and I haven't done anything serious in a long time. That's why I came to you for help. Help me find a suitable job, or at least take me on as a security guard. That's a job I can handle. I promise I won't let you down," Harvey said. Billy liked that idea. His father was healthy now, so he could keep himself busy with some simple labor. Not thinking long, Billy called one of his business partners and he accepted Harvey as a security guard for the production area. Harvey was happy to get to work. Only Selena was different now. She is often moody, sometimes complaining to her son that Julia doesn't love her. Sometimes she cries for no reason. Billy understood that the change in his mother's behavior is due to the fact that now she has no one else to save, and she wasn't used to living for herself. No matter how many hobbies Billy offered, Selena refused. Julia didn't understand it either and tried to find a hobby for her mother-in-law, but it was all in vain. Harvey enthusiastically performed his official duties. He looked forward to the day when he would receive his first paycheck. On his way home and back, he never missed a store to find some original gift for Selena. But Selena was now growing colder to him day by day. On one such day, Selena's recent friend, Sarah, invited them to visit. She had set a fancy table, and Oliver was somewhere passing the time with Leslie. The women cooed about their own things, Harvey tending to them delicately. "Harvey, don't you think the ladies are getting bored in your company? Why don't you give us a party? Would you please go get a bottle of wine for the ladies?" Sarah said coquettishly. Selena perked up and said, "Oh, he'd better not go off on his own after his treatment. Maybe we shouldn't tempt him," she said thoughtfully. "I think Harvey is a man of will. You can see it in his manly look. So Selena, don't worry, your Harvey won't upset you, will he?" Sarah looked at him questioningly. Admittedly, it was the first time Harvey met such an attitude to himself. Sarah immediately put him in a certain position, where he must fulfill the whims of ladies, but himself to remain a man of will. And so it happened. Sarah and Selena drank a bottle of wine for two, and Harvey limited himself to delicate courtship of them. That said, he had not been tempted to join them. Oliver and Leslie, on the other hand, had been going at it these days. Oliver had been swamped with work lately. As a good surgeon, he's in great demand in the medical community. He's often invited for consultations and complex surgeries. These events can last for hours, during which time Oliver is unavailable for calls. After a series of such unavailability, Leslie had the thought in her head that this relationship might not work out either. What she didn't realize was that it was just a shadow of her past that continued to haunt her. The shadow had transformed itself into the image of another woman, and every time, she convinced Leslie that Oliver had another woman on the side that he was devoting his time to. Leslie wanted to tell him her concerns, but she was afraid that he might respond in the affirmative. How could she live with that? So she decided to silently ignore Oliver and try to switch back to her work. Oliver couldn't understand what was going on with her lover. Having experienced betrayal in a previous relationship, he also thought that maybe she had met someone else and couldn't say it directly. So their relationship stopped for a while. But Leslie realized that she was already used to Oliver and she felt good around him. To take away the heartache, now she cries again in the psychologist's office. Thankfully, at least with a psychologist, she was lucky this time that he was able to understand the roots of what was happening. You have no facts and evidence that your young man is going to betray you or has already betrayed you. You were faced with the unknown when he did not return your calls. Where there is uncertainty, there is a shadow of the past in the form of doubt. And in your past, there was no image of trusting the male gender in general. This in girls is usually formed in childhood with the help of a loving and caring father. That's where the roots of your problem are, the psychologist said. Leslie is now finally convinced that this shadow of the past will never let her go. Where will she find this image of trusting relationships and how to download them into her inner world if childhood cannot be returned and her father cannot be remade? The next weekend, Sarah invited Selena and Harvey to her cottage. The friends enjoyed the sun and fresh air during the day. Sarah, as always in her character, she challenged Harvey and made him fulfill petty lady whims. Harvey tried his best to keep a low profile and was successful in all his tasks. The ladies wanted ice cream. He just drove to the neighboring village. In the evening, the ladies got cold, and Harvey had to go around the whole village to get a heater to warm up the house for the night. Selena had been worried about how Harvey would cope with such tasks. Maybe it was worth the inconvenience. She felt a vague resentment towards Sarah. The vacation at the cottage had gone well. It was only on her return that Selena felt unwell. Her blood pressure was high and her heart was racing. The housemates thought it was because of the unusual activity, but the hardest part began at night. She fell into an incomprehensible foggy state, but did not tell the children about it, so as not to disturb them. Toward morning, she decided to go to the kitchen and drink some water. But after taking a couple steps into the living room, she fainted with a rumble. Billy and Julia quickly ran to her aid and called an ambulance. As the ambulance arrived, something strange continued to happen to Selena. Her body grew cold, her eyeballs rolled back, and her face turned dark blue. Billy realized that he was losing his mother in his hands. He went into a panic. Along with them, so did Harvey. Only Julia diligently continued to check her mother-in-law's pulse and perform indirect heart massage. The ambulance barely made it across the threshold of the apartment. The doctor on duty ordered to take the woman to the hospital immediately. An hour later, the doctor informed Billy that Selena had suffered a massive stroke. Now the doctors were fighting to save her life. Billy and Harvey kept watch under the windows of the intensive care unit day and night, but there was no good news. Julia tried to stay close to Leslie and support her. Leslie cried all the time. She had been convinced all her life that there would be beautiful days when she could fully enjoy a mother's love. She worked toward it, digging deeper into herself each time with the help of others. Admittedly, it was the first time Harvey met such an attitude to himself. Sarah immediately put him in a certain position, where he must fulfill the whims of ladies, but himself to remain a man of will. And so it happened. Sarah and Selena drank a bottle of wine for two, and Harvey limited himself to delicate courtship of them. That said, he had not been tempted to join them. Oliver and Leslie, on the other hand, had been going at it these days. Oliver had been swamped with work lately. As a good surgeon, he's in great demand in the medical community. He's often invited for consultations and complex surgeries. These events can last for hours, during which time Oliver is unavailable for calls. After a series of such unavailability, Leslie had the thought in her head that this relationship might not work out either. What she didn't realize was that it was just a shadow of her past that continued to haunt her. The shadow had transformed itself into the image of another woman, and every time, she convinced Leslie that Oliver had another woman on the side that he was devoting his time to. Leslie wanted to tell him her concerns, but she was afraid that he might respond in the affirmative. How could she live with that? So she decided to silently ignore Oliver and try to switch back to her work. Oliver couldn't understand what was going on with her lover. Having experienced betrayal in a previous relationship, he also thought that maybe she had met someone else and couldn't say it directly. So their relationship stopped for a while. But Leslie realized that she was already used to Oliver and she felt good around him. To take away the heartache, now she cries again in the psychologist's office. Thankfully, at least with a psychologist, she was lucky this time that he was able to understand the roots of what was happening. You have no facts and evidence that your young man is going to betray you or has already betrayed you. You were faced with the unknown when he did not return your calls. Where there is uncertainty, there is a shadow of the past in the form of doubt. And in your past, there was no image of trusting the male gender in general. This in girls is usually formed in childhood with the help of a loving and caring father. That's where the roots of your problem are, the psychologist said. Leslie is now finally convinced that this shadow of the past will never let her go. Where will she find this image of trusting relationships and how to download them into her inner world if childhood cannot be returned and her father cannot be remade? The next weekend, Sarah invited Selena and Harvey to her cottage. The friends enjoyed the sun and fresh air during the day. Sarah, as always in her character, she challenged Harvey and made him fulfill petty lady whims. Harvey tried his best to keep a low profile and was successful in all his tasks. The ladies wanted ice cream. He just drove to the neighboring village. In the evening, the ladies got cold, and Harvey had to go around the whole village to get a heater to warm up the house for the night. Selena had been worried about how Harvey would cope with such tasks. Maybe it was worth the inconvenience. She felt a vague resentment towards Sarah. The vacation at the cottage had gone well. It was only on her return that Selena felt unwell. Her blood pressure was high and her heart was racing. The housemates thought it was because of the unusual activity, but the hardest part began at night. She fell into an incomprehensible foggy state, but did not tell the children about it, so as not to disturb them. Toward morning, she decided to go to the kitchen and drink some water, but after taking a couple steps into the living room, she fainted with a rumble. Billy and Julia quickly ran to her aid and called an ambulance. As the ambulance arrived, Something strange continued to happen to Selena. Her body grew cold, her eyeballs rolled back, and her face turned dark blue. Billy realized that he was losing his mother in his hands. He went into a panic. Along with them, so did Harvey. Only Julia diligently continued to check her mother-in-law's pulse and perform indirect heart massage. The ambulance barely made it across the threshold of the apartment. The doctor on duty ordered to take the woman to the hospital immediately. An hour later, the doctor informed Billy that Selena had suffered a massive stroke. Now the doctors were fighting to save her life. Billy and Harvey kept watch under the windows of the intensive care unit day and night, but there was no good news. Julia tried to stay close to Leslie and support her. Leslie cried all the time. She had been convinced all her life that there would be beautiful days when she could fully enjoy a mother's love. She'd worked toward it, digging deeper into herself each time with the help of a psychologist. She was on her way to finding the strength to forgive her parents for her childhood offenses and finally build a warm adult relationship with them. She realized that without this, she would not be able to achieve personal happiness. Now it turns out that she has no chance to redraw her disfigured childhood picture of the world. 5 days later, the doctor regretfully informed her that Selena could not be saved. She gave her soul to God without ever regaining consciousness. Selena's funeral was held. For Leslie and Billy, their mother's passing was a real blow. While Leslie regretted her unrealized love for her mother, Billy felt guilt for not being able to keep his mother safe. Harvey felt bitterness in his soul, but from all strength kept himself in control, so as not to snap into drunkenness. The real support for the family was Sarah. She had an amazing way of finding the right words for each member of the family. Harvey, hang in there. And don't feel sorry for yourself. Selena has given you the best of herself. You should be a pillar of strength for your children and grandchildren out of gratitude to her. Billy, you've shown yourself to be a model of a decent son. Selena had so many good things to say about you in her lifetime. I am sure her soul is pleased with your care. Don't beat yourself up. Man is not God. He has no power over the life and death of his loved ones. Let your mother go and let her sleep in peace. You've done your duty as a son to the fullest. Leslie, you have your whole life ahead of you. You're gonna have your own family and your own kids, and they're gonna be your outlet. Don't let this grief eat away at your already wounded soul. Let go of your mother and strive for your future. These were the words Sarah spoke to the grief-stricken family members. Turns out, time really does heal everything, and what it doesn't heal, it makes less painful. After a while, Harvey's family began to adjust to life without Selena. Harvey himself continued to work. He wasn't even going back to drinking. Today, he received his paycheck and thought about who of his loved ones would be pleased with what. He liked shopping and the process of choosing something nice for his loved ones. And it was good that he had already managed to buy Selena several times pleasant little things. A purse, a neckerchief, or perfume. True, Selena never used them. Instead of joy, she wailed to her husband, "I wish you'd bought something for the grandchildren or for the table. Why do I have to go to all this trouble? You're wasting your money," she said. And when she and Selena visited Sarah or went out together, money flew out of her purse like the wind. She'd order flowers for the table just to make it pretty, and then she'd want music for the atmosphere. Harvey never knew what challenges he would have to take on. Now Harvey remembers those days with warmth in his soul. In the evening after work today, he wanted to surprise Leslie. He bought a box of chocolates at the store and waited for her in the entryway of her apartment. And Leslie was intentionally staying out until midnight tonight. Oliver had been calling her for a few days now, asking to see her. Sarah, of course, told him that Leslie had lost her mother and was heartbroken. She advised her son to stay close to Leslie and try to find a way to approach her. Oliver himself wouldn't mind restoring their relationship, as he'd also realized how used to Leslie he was and didn't want to lose her at all. Only Leslie was being stubborn. She ignored his calls when he came to her office. She asked her assistant to inform Oliver of her absence. Today, Leslie thought it was more likely that Oliver would be guiding her in the driveway. By now, she'd already decided that there was no happy relationship in her life, so there was no point in feeding Oliver false hopes. He was a good man, and it was better to forget her now and start building other, promising relationships with a girl who didn't have such deep childhood traumas. So after work, she gathered all her girlfriends and went to rest. Harvey waited a couple hours, then went home. The next day, he decided to visit Leslie right at the workplace. He had recently seen Billy's office and was extremely city for his son, and Leslie is also developing her own business, and her father has never been interested in the details. Today, he decided to make up for that missing page of his life. When someone knocked on the office door, Leslie was annoyed. She doesn't like to be distracted by the smallest of things. But apparently, her assistant is not in place and will have to accept the unexpected guest. "Come in," Leslie said. "All the more reason for you to come in," Leslie mumbled to herself. She was extremely surprised to see Harvey on the threshold of her office. "Daddy, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" Leslie asked. "And I was just walking down the street and asked passers-by where to find a hard-working girl, Leslie. It turned out everyone knows where Leslie works all day long," said the father. "And who works hard? To him and the candy," said Harvey, and took out of his bag a box of candy. "Dad, you surprise me. Who'd put you up to this?" Leslie could hardly hide her excitement and pleasant surprise. "So who should influence a father to just visit his daughter and make her take a break from work?" said Harvey. "Thanks, Dad. Well, as you can see, this is where my office is. I am the most important person here. I have 4 specialists working under me. We work all day long to turn simple houses and apartments into works of art. Different people come to us and ask us to organize their space so that they're dwelling every day pleasing to their eyes. And we are happy to do it," said Leslie proudly. "Do you get tired of it all, or do you like it?" asked my father. "In general, I really enjoy interior design. That's why I can work 16 or 20 hours a day. That's when I get really tired," Leslie said. "And I'm proud of you, daughter. It takes talent to be able to do this kind of work. And even talent alone is no guarantee. It takes character to achieve something. Then you can count on the realization of talent. And you, I see, have successfully coped with this task. So you have both talent and character. That's why I'm proud of you," Harvey said. "Daddy, thank you. It means a lot to me," said Leslie, not hiding her sincere joy. By this time, she had already eaten one candy after another. "Tell me, what winds brought you here? How are you doing at work?" Leslie asked. "At work I'm fine. Without my close inspection, even a fly does not pass into the protected area. And it is pleasant enough to communicate with very well-mannered and cultured young people of your age," said Harvey. "Well, in fact, I came to you on business. Yesterday, we got our paychecks. I even got a bonus. Today, I decided to do something nice for my daughter," said Harvey, then took his old wallet out of his pocket, took out some bills, and put them in front of Leslie. "Daddy, what are you doing? Keep that money. I make enough," said Leslie. "I know that your brother, earn many times more than me. But I'm your father, and I'm happy to finally realize that. I try to live now in harmony with the voice of my heart, and it conveys to me that my heart wants to show my fatherly love for you in every way," said Harvey. Here Leslie was alarmed, because she remembered the words of the psychologist. She was glad that in time she caught herself in the shadows of her past, and she has time to choose a different approach to the main man of her life. "Exactly. I just needed some money today." "Well, how much is here?" said Leslie, took the money from the table and started counting. Then she turned to her father. "That's not enough. Give me more," said Leslie. Harvey rejoiced, took out his wallet and pulled out some more bills. "Here you go, daughter. If you need it, I can give you everything," "I don't have any special expenses," said Harvey. "All do not need, it is enough," said Leslie, and put all the bills in his wallet. For the rest of the day, she could not concentrate on her work. She was overwhelmed by pleasant experiences that she had never felt before in her life. It was as if a big mountain had grown inside her, where she could run to at any moment and hide from any misfortune. She didn't realize yet that the shadow of the past from her distant childhood had receded and a new image of her caring father had taken its place. But changes in life happen regardless of a person's understanding. A couple days later, she thought about Oliver and their relationship again. Suddenly, she realized how stupid she was being with him. And really, Oliver had given no reason for her to doubt his fidelity. And her habit of believing every thought that came into her head seemed a little strange. She decided to rectify the situation immediately and dialed Oliver's number herself. He was glad to get her call. They met the same day and promised each other to never part again. To fulfill this in practice, they decided to enter into an official marriage. Oliver and Leslie decided to have a modest, no-frills wedding. Immediately after the celebration, they set off on a long journey together. Sarah was a little sad that now she would be all alone, but there was much more joy. After all these exciting events, Harvey felt unwell. For several days now, he had been unable to go to work and was lying at home. At Billy's suggestion to go to the doctor, he refuses. Billy realizes that the grief of losing Selena still continues to torment his father. At a family dinner, which Harvey didn't want to attend, Julia starts a conversation. Harvey needs to unwind. Could it be that his work is wearing him down? Especially since Selena left, he hasn't been himself. "We need to find some recreational activities for him," she said. "What kind of recreation can there be when he's approaching 70? He should just enjoy a vacation, but he doesn't want that either," said Billy. "And we have seen that when Grandpa talks to Grandma Sarah, he becomes cheerful and kind," said Tom, Billy's eldest son. Billy and Julia looked at each other and both froze in thought. Then Mickey decided to speak his mind. "Why shouldn't she be our grandmother? We have no grandmother now, and she has no grandchildren, but she is very kind." Mickey put the question to him. "Well, that's a question Grandma Casey and Grandpa Harvey have to decide for themselves," said Billy. "Dad, you said yourself that grandparents become like children. Maybe they're afraid or embarrassed to tell you. You just suggest it to them, like you suggest us to do something, and maybe they'll like it," Mickey said, and felt incredibly proud of his ingenuity. Instantly, they started laughing together. Julia took that as a good sign. Children can sense everything after all. After this family council, new plans had emerged. Now it was time to get Harvey back on his feet and put them into action. Thankfully, Harvey was on the mend and started going to work again. One day, Billy invited his father to a nearby pub to watch soccer together. When both were in high spirits from the victory of their favorite team, Billy started a conversation. "Dad, don't you think Sarah has a thing for you and you for her?" Billy also put the question in the way his youngest son Mickey knows how to do. Harvey was a little confused and didn't know what to say. It turned out that he himself had not noticed his sympathy for Sarah. She really knows how to cheer him up instantly and always finds the right words. "We've already understood everything and we're happy for you. We'll help you organize a beautiful romantic evening when you tell Sarah your decision," said Billy. Harvey didn't have to think about it much. He was already feeling lonely, and he didn't mind the company of cheerful Sarah. But how could he tell her? What if she took offense? And Selena considered her his friend. Wouldn't that be a betrayal of her memory? He decided to talk to Sarah himself about it. The answer to that, too, was brilliant. "Selena was dear to me, too. If she was still alive, I would be happy for Leslie and Oliver right now. Sadly, she's not among us. But she told me many times how much she loved you and would do anything to make sure you were cared for. I think she was an incredibly strong woman. because not everyone is able to carry her feelings through the hardships of life and protect them no matter what. Yes, sometimes it was hard for your children to understand, but Selena was always devoted to you. I think that now her soul wishes the same thing, that you do not suffer, but are cared for. If Celine's spirit gives any sign of that, I wouldn't mind brightening your loneliness, said Sarah. That same night, Sarah had a dream about Celine. In this dream, she was wearing a smart dress and walking through a poppy field. Her face was flooded with light and her eyes were shining with bliss. Suddenly, she walks up to Sarah, pulls out a mysterious talisman and throws it in her direction. He was very dear to me. Take it to yourself and keep it safe. I trust it only to you. With these words, Selena flew away to the heavens. When Sarah woke up, she realized everything correctly, so she would grow old together with Harvey.